no difference between digital code and genetic code. And because digital code can move as an electromagnetic wave, basically close to the speed of light, we can now move biology at the speed of light. It's one of the few science announcements we got an immediate response from the President and the Pope. The President asked his Bioethics Commission to start looking at this as their #1 issue, and the Vatican released a statement that all we did was change one of the engines of life, and it could lead to some important advances, but it wasn't creating life itself. But DNA is not the engine of life, it's the software of life. The proteins are the engine. They're driven directly by that code in a very understandable, predictable fashion now. So this has lots of implications in lots of different areas.
If you try to understand this entire topic, the DNA has 3 different functions. One is communication by transmitting and receiving biophotons. And these are strands or parts of strands that do this. The second one is producing substances by DNA producing RNA and RNA producing proteins. This is kind of the order of things happening in the cell. So there are parts of the DNA that are there to create certain substances. And a third part where people are doing research is the attempt to abuse DNA as logic elements. It's like building a little computer by using these single units a DNA is built out of.
And this is not the view that people necessarily have of themselves, that you're basically a DNA-driven software device. Every cell on this planet works that way, in a biological to mechanical kind of fashion. There's no brain controlling what happens with DNA reading and protein synthesis in your cells. The combination of 100 trillion cells gives different people different abilities to make wonderful music, to make science advances, to think, but every one of those cells operates in the same fashion. And that means we will be able to decode how the brain functions by understanding these same mechanisms.
DNA resonance code and the brain code speak the same language. If you decipher DNA code, you will decipher the brain code. While all other research is prohibited, restricted, unfunded, the brain-computer interface is really well funded these days. Defense agencies all have open programs to develop brain-computer interface. It opens the doors for the mind control. And also it opens the door for technology-assisted telepathy. Let's define the telepathy. Telepathy in Wikipedia is defined as communication from mind to mind without the use of physical senses. So we can use computer to link it to the, or technology to link it to the one mind and then to another mind and make an interface, transferring the information.
And it comes down to a kind of system that resembles old-fashioned telephone system. You have like dial-in codes, and each frequency you give in, like do-do-do-do-do-do-do, every frequency you give in is switching on one single DNA element, making it open to take the next step. So basically what you can do with it is creating synthetic DNA or RNA that is possible to be activated with a dial-in sequence of frequencies.
But wouldn't it be great if you could do these thousands of different molecular IDs or RNAs in a single brain, and that way they're integrated, every voxel, every pixel of every section can be aligned and you know where you are. And not just for the RNAs and other molecular identifiers, but what the brain was thinking during activity. So the question is, do I see a path forward for changing the tagging for readout so that we can do it in vivo real time? Is that the question? Yeah. So yes, we're working in a direction where the molecular recording devices we have will be able to read out optically not through optical fibers, which is just as bad as electrodes in a certain sense in the crowding problem, fitting them into the brain, but via the circulatory system, which is pervasive. There's essentially one capillary per neuron in the brain, so it's a really excellent way of interfacing optically. And also the optics doesn't go very far. 4 centimeters is heroic, and you need a pretty big light source, but just going the 10 microns across the endothelial cell is pretty easy. You basically convert DNA information into ionic information into computer information. So that's going from DNA to ions, but for the brain, we're interested in the opposite, going from ions to DNA.
And this is a completely new technology that, like the Morgellons, is light-based. It's like building a little computer by using these single units DNA is built out of.
We can digitize life and regenerate life from the digital world. And just as the ribosome can convert the analog message in mRNA into a protein robot, it's becoming standard now in the world of science to convert digital code into proteins, viruses, and now cells. Scientists send digital code to each other instead of sending genes or proteins. Now we're in the process of building a much smaller, simpler, what I call digital conversion device. So my digital biological converter is going to work somewhat like a telephone, where it takes digital waves, it converts it into sound waves, so you can hear it. Only it will have a small box that you can attach to a computer to in fact receive a digital wave and convert it into a protein.
Within the tubulin proteins, which a microtubule is made of, an array of electron-conducting hydrophobic pockets allow energy to pass through each tubulin in multiple potential directions. This forms a larger network of possible patterns that energy can exist in the cylindrical lattice. In each hydrophobic pocket, the electron clouds of indole and phenylalanine rings may become shifted one way or another. Much like a bit of data in a computer, a 1 or a 0, this quantum bit can also exist in a state of quantum superposition between both states. This alters the pathways that energy can inhabit in the microtubule.
These proteins have been described as nature's robots. And if you think about it, for every single task in the cell, every imaginable task is described by Tanford and Reynolds. There is a unique protein to carry out that task. It's programmed when to go on, when to go off. And it does this based on its structure. It doesn't have consciousness. It doesn't have a control from a mind or a higher center. Everything a protein does is built into its linear code derived from the DNA code.
The DNA in the nucleus is connected electromagnetically with microtubules in the axon. And you can see on the photograph, it's known that microtubules surround the nucleus, and there is an interface, electromagnetic, not mechanical, not chemical, but electromagnetic interface between microtubules and DNA.
And so the resonant frequency of the DNA is what they use to fine-tune the technology to take total control of your entire body, spirit, soul, being, and mind. It's total not only mind control, it's total human being control. And it is the essential element that allows them to manipulate your emotions so totally and completely, to manipulate your thoughts so totally and completely, to manipulate everything you do and see and hear and think and feel every single minute of every single day, so totally and completely.
This could be defined as a form of entanglement of the biological atoms with the background field, thus manifesting as a non-local, namely literally not there phenomenon. In terms of physics, of course, this requires the existence of some kind of vacuum field, something that was decried for a long time, but is now established as the concept of the zero-point fluctuations that quantum field theory embraces. An implication is that ultimately DNA could be transferred or transported, let us say teleported, immaterially and non-locally as a light or laser modulation.